Hi, welcome to Tea and Mystics. Today I will be talking about the book The Darkened Room while sipping on some cold relief tea from Citizen Tea. The Darkened Room is a book that looks at women in spiritualism in the late Victorian period in England. And I picked this book up because I do find the topic of spiritualism to be rather interesting. And my own knowledge was more about the history of the movement in the United States, even though I knew a little bit about how it crossed the Atlantic and interest grew in England. I didn't know too much about it. So I was delighted to find this book and pick it up and learn a bit about spiritualism in England during the late Victorian period. The author themselves came up with the idea for much of what's presented in this book through a PhD dissertation, and you can definitely tell that when you're reading it, and that's not any sort of critique on it, just more about like the way the style comes across. Of course, the bonus of that is that it's very well researched and it's also very well annotated. So if there's any part in the book that really strikes your fancy and you want to learn more about, there's great notes at the back of the resources that the author used, so you're able to continue your studies. And I really appreciate that in a nonfiction book, because sometimes there can be just one, even just like offhanded fact that can spark your interest and you'll want to learn more. And it's great when there's a lot of resources to continue your own learning. The book itself takes a more feminist lens to the role of women in spiritualism. And while spiritualism was a really fantastic and interesting movement for the fact that it gave women a bit more power and more of a voice than they had in the wider social public sphere at the time, the writer is also looking at how the perceptions of women's traits and like innate personality that was very much a part of that time, of the Victorian time, played into why they were seen as being better mediums or more readily could talk to the spirit realm. And I found that part very interesting. I really appreciated the two really specific case studies that are provided in the book. One looks at a family that became very interested in spirit communication, and each of the members sort of got involved in their own way, and it follows through with that. And then the second story is looking at a specific woman whose husband charged her with lunacy and actually had her locked up in an asylum for some time. And part of the arguments that kept her there while she continually had to fight to get herself out is that she had this interest in spiritualism and communicating with spirits of the beyond. And I found that part very interesting. You get just a little bit of a taste of what the lunacy laws were in Victorian England. And it's important to remember that the field of psychology and psychiatry, were really just starting at that time, and it gives you a bit of a view of how people were perceiving and diagnosing personality types at the time, and how it could also, these approaches to the field would easily look at women as being more hysterical. And so I found that part very fascinating and one that I might want to continue reading. So yeah, overall, I found it a really enjoyable read and I learned a lot. And if you have any sort of interest in the history of spiritualism, again, it's more concerning itself with spiritualism in England at this specific sort of time frame. It's not really getting into modern spiritualism, because it's important to remember that spiritualism is a religion and it's still ongoing. There are spiritualist churches around the world, and many people consider themselves as being a part of a spiritualist church. So it's not really getting so much into that as just looking at this specific sort of time frame and the role of women and, you know, the hows and the whys maybe of spiritualism's growth in England at that time. So today, in terms of tea talk, I have been sipping on Citizen Tea's Cold Relief, and I really enjoy this tea when I feel like my allergies are acting up a bit, maybe just a little bit stuffy, or even if I have a slight tickle in my throat. During these COVID pandemic times, I do find that if I'm reading a lot about COVID, it is a little bit psychosomatic with me, and I'll just start to feel some of the symptoms, and then I'll brew one of these teas, sip on it, and my throat will feel better. That being said, remember that if you are ever showing any symptoms for COVID, to make sure you get tested to know if you have it or not. But back to the tea, I do find this a really great blend for anytime, as I was saying, you feel a little stuffy, or you just need to sort of cleanse your throat, cleanse your nasal ways. And the ingredients of it are ginger, licorice root, eucalyptus leaves, orange peel, valerian root, peppermint, lemongrass, basil leaves, cardamom seeds, cloves, oregano leaves, yarrow flower, black pepper, parsley leaves, and cinnamon. So as you can hear, it's quite the herbal blend. When I first tried it, it does have a bit more of that sort of almost medicinal-like quality to the taste, just slight, but I've really grown accustomed to it and actually really enjoy the taste of it now. And as I said, even just smelling it can kind of just perk me up a little bit, but perk me up in like a soothing way, which is interesting. It's not like if I'm tired that it helps give me energy. It more just makes, as I said, sort of cleanses the passageways a little bit. So if you're looking for a nice tea like that, you may want to grab a small bag of the Cold Relief from Citizen Tea. Thanks so much for watching Tea and Mystics. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give it a thumbs up down below and hit subscribe and hit the bell so you always know when there's a new episode. Once again, thanks for tuning in to Tea and Mystics. Cheers!